The R9 390 stands as a direct competitor to the NVIDIA GTX 970 in terms of its pricing in the market. But does it offer enough compelling value to be considered over the most popular GPU right now, at least according to the Steam hardware survey? Well, let's find out. Let's take a physical tour of the PowerColor PCS R9 390 first. The card comes in at a decently large size of 305mm long by 130mm wide by 55mm high. The length of the card is covered by its quadruple heat pipes and nickel-plated heat sinks, on top of which sits the triple fan configuration. PowerColor equips these fans with its mute fan feature, which keeps the fans idle until a load temp of 60 degrees has been reached. These fans were incredibly efficient as my card never reached over 70 degrees Celsius even when overclocked. The fans are then covered by a solidly constructed aluminum shroud with a design aesthetic that I personally like. And the card is completed with its anodized aluminum backplate. In the box, PowerColor has decided to include a single 6-pin to 8-pin PCIe power adapter. And in terms of I/O, it comes with the standard PowerColor issue of DVI-I, DVI-D, HDMI 2.0, and DisplayPort 1.2 outputs. And for power requirements, there's both a 6-pin and an 8-pin PCIe power connector with PowerColor suggesting at least a 750-watt power supply to run the card. And as far as features go, the R9 390 is equipped with the latest AMD features such as Dynamic Super Resolution, Liquid VR, and FreeSync. And it should be noted that while the R9 390 supports Crossfire, it does it through the new fancy way of not requiring the physical Crossfire bridge. It's definitely a good-looking card, but what can we find under the hood? Well, the R9 390 comes equipped with 8 GB of GDDR5 512-bit VRAM clocked in at 1500 MHz, and the core clock comes in at 1010 MHz stock. As far as its ability to overclock, I was able to get my card personally up to a core clock of 1150 MHz for a 13.8% boost, and the memory I pushed up to 1800 MHz for a whopping 20% increase. Definitely a decent card to overclock. How that translates into performance is actually pretty good. The R9 390 is phenomenal at 1080p. 1440p performance also crosses 60 FPS in most AAA games at max detail. 4K is also an option with 30 FPS being realized in quite a few games, and would be possible in all with a few detailed downgrades. The only anomaly is really The Witcher 3, which has been known to hit AMD cards a bit harder than NVIDIA cards. Looking at the value per frame rate helps to put the R9 390's performance into perspective. At 1080p, the 390 from PowerColor actually goes toe-to-toe against the GTX 970 from Galax in terms of best value, whether it be in the South African Rand or the US dollar. And even just looking at the pure frame rates, the 390 puts up very similar numbers to the 970. At 1440p, it's a very similar story with the R9 390 and GTX 970 vying for the title of the best 1440p gaming card, whether it be with the Rand or the dollar. The 4K resolution is where the R9 390 finally begins to see some separation from the 970 in terms of being the better value card, thanks largely in part to the fact that it has double the VRAM of the 970. However, at least in the South African market, its elder brother, the R9 390X, is actually the best value 4K card to get. And with the last of the charts, it's time to come to a conclusion. Honestly, the PowerColor R9 390 makes a really compelling argument to choose Team Red over Team Green when going for a middle-of-the-road card. Its lower price and higher 4K frame rates make it almost definitively the better option. But the reason I say almost, and hesitate to just declare it the outright winner, is due to the fact that certain games that utilize NVIDIA GameWorks give this card a performance hit. I mean, a 15 FPS difference at 1080p on The Witcher 3 between the R9 390 and the GTX 970 is nothing to sneeze at, especially since it drops the R9 390 to a sub 60 FPS average. And I've had people comment before that I shouldn't use NVIDIA GameWorks games to benchmark AMD cards since they perform worse. But my counter argument to that is that people will actually play those games with AMD cards, and they deserve to know that the R9 390 won't live up to the 970 on those titles. It's an unfortunate trend in game development, but it's one that needs to be accounted for by the consumer when choosing their next graphics card. And then there's also the fact that the rated power consumption for the R9 390 is higher than the GTX 970, which again could sway the decision of a consumer to pick up a card that is already rated at their power supply limit. I mean, it's much more likely that the average user is going to have around a 500 watt power supply rather than a 750 watt. And I know that the rated PSUs that manufacturers state with their products isn't entirely accurate, but many customers are going to look at their recommendations and make their decisions by them regardless. And again, this isn't to argue for the GTX 970, but rather it's a downside that needs to be considered when looking at the R9 390. But would I choose a 390 over a 970? Personally, yeah. But that's completely due to the fact that I don't really play titles that rely heavily on NVIDIA GameWorks. So really it's up to you to decide which one would be a better option. But I think that it's safe to say PowerColor has brought a worthy competitor to the market. And with that conclusion, I'd like to give a big thank you to Wootware for sending over the PowerColor PCS R9 390 for review. Wootware is South Africa's leading retailer for all PowerColor cards, as well as a host of other gaming items that you might need for your rig. Their prices are super competitive and their customer service is unbeatable as they strive to make sure you have a great experience with them. So if you're in South Africa, head on over to wootware.co.za to woot up your life. And that wraps it up for this video, guys. Like this video if you found it helpful. Dislike it if you think I'm an NVIDIA fanboy. You can leave a comment down below with any suggestions of other graphics cards that you want me to check out for further reviews. And if you're looking to watch more of my content, you can click that button right up there to see the time I turned a mechanical key switch tester into a fully functional keyboard. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.